Hey there everybody, and welcome to my review of the all-new and very green Skoda Kamiq. So Skoda has finally jumped on the compact SUV bandwagon with this, the all-new Kamiq. Now underneath it does have the same platform as the Volkswagen T-Cross and Seat Arona. Now I've had the Kamiq for a week to see if it's actually any good, or if perhaps Skoda are just a little bit late to the game. So stick with me to find out. Now the Skoda Kamiq sits on the new MQB A0 platform, just like the Volkswagen T-Cross and Seat Arona. However, the Kamiq is a little bit different to those other cars within the Volkswagen group. You see, the Arona is kind of a jacked up version of a Seat Ibiza hatchback, and the T-Cross is a jacked up version of the Volkswagen Polo. However, you can't say that the Kamiq is a jacked up version of the Scala, because the Scala is actually a bigger car, yet it sits on the same platform. That's more akin to the likes of the Ford Focus and Kia Ceed. And you can also not say that this is a jacked up version of the Skoda Fabia, because that sits on an older platform. So this really does kind of sit on its own in terms of the Skoda lineup, and also the Volkswagen Group lineup in that regard, because it's not a bigger version of a smaller car. So I've had the Kamiq for a week, and I want to see if it's actually any good, and if you should consider it as possibly a Yeti replacement if you think the Skoda Karoq, which is now the medium-sized SUV for the Skoda lineup, is a bit too big. Style-wise, well, it's very clearly a Skoda, isn't it? So it's not the most exciting car to look at, but you know what? I don't think it's the most boring one either, especially in that rally green paint job. It definitely gives the Kamiq a bit of a boost. And sticking with the Skoda SUV design language, we have got the double cluster headlights at the front of the car, but unlike the Karoq and the Kodiaq, the top light cluster is actually very thin. Yes, I know it does look a little bit like a Citroen C3 Aircross or a Hyundai Kona, but in terms of the Skoda lineup, it definitely is distinctive. Now there are a few other features I really do like on the Kamiq, and it shows Skoda's design language evolving. So firstly, there is the front end of the Kamiq. It's actually very flat in the way it's presented. It's got quite a purposeful look to it. Other Skodas have just got kind of a more sloping front end that tapers off. And also we've got the back end of the Kamiq with the new rear light design language, first seen on the Skoda Scala and will be seen again on the upcoming new Octavia. But on the Scala, I just felt it looked a little bit bland, whereas on the Kamiq, I actually think the rear end is its best feature. It just looks very squat, wide and purposeful. And also you get scrolling indicators on this SEL version. I know everyone's doing it now, and you can also get scrolling indicators for the front of the Kamiq, but it is £1,000 optional extra, and you do get full LED lights as well. Personally, I would just say stick with the standard lights, which is what I've got here, and just kind of use that money to give yourself an optional extra on the inside of the car. But overall, I actually like the design of the Kamiq, and I think it's different enough from the likes of the Seat Arona and Volkswagen T-Cross. The Arona does look like a bigger version of the Ibiza, and the T-Cross looks like a funky version of the Polo that has a bit more individualism to it. But let me know what you think out of those three cars, which you think is the best looking. So click up in the top right hand corner and choose from the Volkswagen T-Cross, the Skoda Kamiq and the Seat Arona. But I think that's enough now with the outside of the Kamiq. Let's have a little look at the inside. Sat in the front of the Skoda Kamiq, of course with this being a little crossover, you have got a raised driving position. So getting in and out of the car is really easy, and if you do suffer from any kind of mobility issues, then this is definitely one little crossover to consider. Then you find that the seats themselves are incredibly comfortable and even hold a big bear like me in place, and there is plenty of adjustment. Even the steering wheel has both rake and reach adjustments, so getting the perfect driving position is easy. Also, I love the design of the seats themselves. They're actually pretty cool and funky. We've got this kind of black denim look to them with contrasting Alcantara, and check this out, we've even got copper stitching around the edge. Who thought you'd get that in a Skoda? Now I will mention that this particular car does have electrically adjustable seats. They are an optional extra, but if you check out the description down below, you can see all the options fitted to this particular car with their prices at the time of recording. So then once you find yourself in the driver's seat, you do find that the design of the interior of the Kamiq is identical to that of the Scala, and that's no bad thing. So we've got this nice new kind of floating dash display, which is actually set high up on the dash, so you don't have to take your eyes too far off the road to navigate through the menus whilst you're driving. Now on the Scala that I had, it had the 8-inch touchscreen, and if you click up in the top right hand corner, you can watch my review of the Skoda Scala. But on this Kamiq, I've got the 9.2-inch touchscreen, which is standard on the SEL trim. And the screen itself is lovely and clear. It's actually pretty smooth and easy to operate for the most part on the move, and I will go into some of the negatives later on the driving part of the review. But it is a lovely display, and it does give a fresh look to that of the Skoda range. Also on the SEL, behind the steering wheel, we've got the 10-inch digital display, and again that is standard, and it is very nice and clear and easy to use, and you can customize some of the displays for you. Now, when it comes to Cubby Spaces here in the Kamiq, there are a few of them, and it is very similar to that of the Scala. So we've got decent sized door bins. You can put a decent sized bottle of water in there, but they're not lined with any fabric. So if you do chuck any loose items, they are going to rattle around a bit. We got a little extra cubby space here underneath the light switch, and then on the center console, just in front of the gear lever, we've got a nice big cubby area where you can put your phone and also connect it to one of 2 USB-C inputs. So that is something to consider when you're buying a Kamiq, to make sure that your dealership provides you with an adapter. And then behind the gear shift, we've got a couple of cup holders, and one of them's got the little nodules in, so you can unscrew a bottle of water or your passenger can whilst you're driving. And then we've got a central armrest, which you can lift up, and you've got a little bit of extra space. However, just like the Scala, there's no ratchet to the armrest, but it does feel a little bit higher than that of the Scala, which is nice to use on longer journeys. Just be aware, however, if you have got a bottle of drink in the cup holder and you slide the armrest, you might knock it. Then we got the glove box, which is of a decent size again, and it is actually lined with fabric this time, so you can chuck loose items in there. And then finally, we have got a little cubby space underneath the passenger seat, so that is useful if you want some items to be not seen. But all in all, it is a really lovely place to sit. And check this out. We've got soft touch plastics here on top of the dash and the doors, and we've also got that denim cloth effect here on the door inserts. So soft touch plastics in the Kamiq, you don't get that in a Seat Arona or Volkswagen T-Cross. But all in all, I very much like the interior design of the Skoda Kamiq. Not really too fussy. Yes, the T-Cross is a bit bolder and a bit more individual in its design, because it is designed for younger people, but this is a nice, sensible place to be. Now, that's the front of the Skoda Kamiq. Let's have a sit in the back. Sat in the back of the Skoda Kamiq is actually really spacious back here. So that driver's seat is set to my driving position. I'm 5'7" tall and 5'7" wide, and as you can see, I've got loads of knee room, and headroom is really good as well. You could definitely get a couple of 6-foot adults sat in the back here of the Kamiq. 3 adults, I think you would be pushing it. However, 3 kids, no problem. And once you're sat here, you do find that the seats are really comfortable, and they got that same funky design with the front seats, with the kind of denim effect, Alcantara and copper stitching. Cubby spaces are okay, I would say. You've got some okay sized door bins, you can get a small bottle of drink in there, and we've got some aeroplane style pockets on the backs of the front seats. But that's it. There's no armrest with any cup holders or no through loading. That's actually an optional extra. Now, you do also get Isofix supports on the outer seats, but also as standard on the front passenger seat, which is a highlight. And in traditional Volkswagen Group style, yes, they do come with little clip covers which are easy to lose, but once you've removed them, it is easy to affix a child seat. But all in all, it's actually very spacious back here. The windows are absolutely huge, and they do open all the way down. And you have got some big windows in the C-pillars to allow extra light into the cabin, which is a bonus. But yeah, I'm very pleased with the rear passenger space of the Skoda Kamiq. But now, let's go have a little look at the boot. Opening the boot of the Skoda Kamiq presents you with 400 litres of space, and as an optional extra you can get that tailgate to be powered. But once the boot is open, you find you've got a nice square load area, but at 400 litres it's not the class best. Cars like the upcoming Renault Captur and Nissan Juke have actually got larger boot capacities. And it lacks the versatility of something like a Volkswagen T-Cross, where you can actually slide the rear seats forward to increase boot capacity. Granted, you do sacrifice rear legroom, but more than likely you won't have rear passengers sat in there to make use of that extra boot space. But the Kamiq is not devoid of features. We have got some tethering hooks there to secure items down on the ground. We've got some shopping hooks which actually feel pretty sturdy. We've got a 12-volt socket as well, and of course with this being a Skoda, you can remove the boot light, and it also doubles up as a torch. How very simply clever. And if you do decide to put the seats down, firstly you've got to navigate a bit of a boot lip there, and also on the base of the seats you have a little bit of a ledge if you are loading any large heavy items. But you can go for a variable boot floor, which does give you an almost flat load bay, and you can put the parcel shelf underneath it if you are putting any large heavy items into the Kamiq. So that is handy. It's just a shame it's not standard on the SEL. But all in all, I do like the boot capacity of the Kamiq. It is very useful, if however not the class best. And if you are looking at changing from a Yeti to the Kamiq, just be aware that the boot capacity is a little bit smaller than the Yeti. So just be aware of that if you are looking to change. But yeah, it's not too bad here in the back of the Kamiq, but I think it's time we take it for a drive. So once you get driving in the Skoda Kamiq, first impressions are really good. Actually reminds me of two cars kind of combined together. Firstly, the Skoda Scala, because of the way the interior is laid out, although you are a little bit raised up. And then secondly, the Seat Arona that I drove earlier in the year. And if you want to watch my review of that Spanish little crossover, then by all means click up in the top right hand corner. But yeah, first impressions are very good. It's a very easy, comfortable car to drive. Visibility is really good. We've got some reasonably thin A-pillars, kind of the standard as what you get for the class. And if you look over your shoulder, because of the large windows in the C-pillar, there's actually not much of a blind spot. It is very comparable to that of the Volkswagen T-Cross and the Seat Arona as well, in terms of all-round visibility. It is very good. I've also got some blind spot monitoring on this car. Again, it is an optional extra, but the way that it's located, it's no longer on the actual mirror. You now have a little light panel on the inside of the actual mirror casing, so it does make it easier to see whilst on the move. But yeah, first impressions of the Kamiq definitely gets a thumbs up. So at the time of recording, there are 3 trim levels to choose from. The entry level S, SE, and what I have here, the top of the range SEL. There will be a Monte Carlo version to give you a bit of a more sportier look on the way, but at the moment that's not available to order. And I would be honest, just avoid the entry level S and stick with either the SE or SEL depending on what you want from the car. Personally, I think the SE is the pick of the bunch. The reason being is you get things like cruise control, rear parking sensors, automatic lights, air conditioning, and an 8-inch touchscreen with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. If you really need sat-nav, then yes, you can spec up to the SEL. We get that 9.2-inch display, the digital cockpit, 18-inch alloy wheels, and the funky seats. But yeah, for me personally, the SE is definitely the pick of the range in terms of value for money. Engine choices in the Kamiq range are going to sound very familiar because they are exactly the same as what you get with the Skoda Scala. So you've got 2 1-litre 3-cylinder turbocharged petrol units, one with 95 brake horsepower and the other with 113. There's a 1.5-litre TSI, that's a 4-cylinder turbocharged unit with 148 brake horsepower, and a 1.6-litre diesel with 113 brake horsepower, again turbocharged. All of the engines, bar the entry-level 95 brake horsepower, come with either a 6-speed manual or 7-speed DSG, and I would definitely recommend with the petrols going for that 1-litre 113 brake horsepower. And I don't actually have a preference when it comes to the gearbox, so I've got that engine with the 7-speed DSG and it's absolutely fine. It's nice and smooth, however can be a little bit hesitant when you want to put your foot down. If you go for the 6-speed manual, it's got a lovely positive throw to it, if a tiny bit notchy, but if anything the notchiness just kind of makes sure that you've actually got the right gear selected. But all in all, the engines are very familiar if you know the Volkswagen group, and I would definitely recommend that 1-litre 3-cylinder. Main reason being is it saves yourself a few pennies if you go for the 1.5, and that's also, like the Scala, it's a nice engine to have, but you kind of feel it's lagging in a little bit of power. You just kind of feel it's not as responsive as one of these 1-litre units, and I do stick by that with the Kamiq. The 1.5 is lovely, but nah, the 1-litre is absolutely fine and it will suit you for day-to-day driving. When it comes to the ride and handling on the Kamiq, this is actually a strong point for the Skoda. As I mentioned earlier, I kind of got a reminder when you start driving of two cars, the Skoda Scala and also the Seat Arona. And the Arona was a car I really liked. It genuinely surprised me as to how good it was. And the Kamiq just feels very much in the same realm as the Arona and also the Volkswagen T-Cross. It's incredibly comfortable, it's surprisingly refined, there's very little wind noise coming off the A-pillars or the wing mirrors, but if you have got it in complete silence, then yes, you do just hear it in the background. Tyre roar is actually very well insulated. I actually did a 400-mile trip in the Kamiq earlier in the week when I had it, and it was a brilliant cruiser. Yes, if you get onto any rough surfaces, it does kind of amplify the road noise, but all in all, it was a very good motorway cruiser. And when you go over any kind of potholes or anything like that, yes, you can feel them, and they do resonate into the cabin a little bit more than the Arona, but I think that's because this has got 18-inch alloy wheels and the Arona had 17-inch, and that's another reason why I recommend the SE trim over the SEL, because with the SE you've got smaller alloys and therefore it'll just be a little bit more comfortable and the ride being a bit more compliant than these 18s. But of course, if you see form over function, then go for the SEL, get the 18 inches. It's still a very comfortable car, but the 17s just ride a little bit better. The steering in the Kamiq is really good as well, just like the, I won't say smaller Skoda Scala, but the lower Skoda Scala. It's nice and light, which means low speed manoeuvring and parking is really easy. But if you do get up to motorway speeds, it's not completely devoid of feel, so that you feel like you're driving about in a video game. Yes, it's not exactly a sporty car, that was never the Kamiq's intention, but if you are after the sportiest car in its class, then yes, you might want to look at something like the Seat Arona. But in terms of everyday driving, it's absolutely fine. It will get you to where you need to be, and at no point are you going to feel completely detached from the car. You are going to know what it's doing. Now earlier when I was talking about the interior of the Kamiq, there was something I was saving for the driving part of the review, and here it is. And it's basically to let you know that some of the usability that you tend to expect from Skoda has actually been lost through the technology. So with the SEL, you've got the 9.2-inch display and the dual zone climate control, but there's no button on the dual zone climate control to kind of change the direction of where you want the air to blow and things like that. You've actually got a menu button, and when you press it, it brings up a little display on the infotainment system of the interior of the car, and that's where you can change things like temperature, even though you've got some rotary dials, the fan strength and also the fan direction. It's just a little bit fiddly to use, particularly on the move, because some of the icons are not too big. And then once you're done with everything, and if you've been using, for example, Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, there's no back button to take you back to those apps, which is another reason why I recommend the SE, because there is a dedicated app button. So if you do, say, have an SE spec Kamiq or Scala and you decide to go for dual zone climate control, which is absolutely fine, you just find then as well, when you go onto this menu button, you can just simply press a app button and it takes you back to Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, essentially the previous screen. With the 9.2-inch display, you actually have to press the menu button, and then you got to press Apple CarPlay or Android Auto to get you back there. So essentially you're pressing one extra button to get where you want to be, and that's where it kind of feels a little bit like a Peugeot in that sense. But if you are looking at cars like this, then the new Peugeot 2008 will more than likely have the same type of infotainment system with the little piano keys on the dashboard. It's only a minor niggle, but in terms of Skoda's being very user-friendly, this is kind of like a backward step, but it is something that you are going to see on other Volkswagen Group cars. Luckily, they haven't gone full Audi and have two displays which actually all do the climate control buttons, which means you really do have to take your eyes off the road. So just bear that in mind if you're after, you know, a lot of usability from your Kamiq. The SE is definitely a bit more user-friendly in that regard. Now, other little niggles that I've noticed are actually very much the same as what I had with the Scala. So we've got the sun visor with a vanity mirror, but there's no vanity light. Now, I've not had any real issues with the armrest. I mean, I can rest my arm on it for a long journey, so that's not really a big concern. The only other thing I've noticed is sometimes under braking and on kind of normal road surfaces, there's a little bit more vibration coming through into the cabin. But in terms of long journeys I've done in the Kamiq, and as I mentioned, I've done a 400-mile journey earlier in the week. For the most part, that was absolutely fine. I had no issues whatsoever. But just driving on some of these slow roads, I just noticed a little bit of more vibration coming through on the steering wheel. But I don't think it's anything of too much concern. But all in all, that's pretty much everything I've got in regards to kind of niggles on the Skoda Kamiq. Other than that, it's absolutely fine. It drives very well and is a very relaxing car to be in. So what are my thoughts on the all-new Skoda Kamiq? Well, it's a very good car. I mean, it reminds me very much of the Seat Arona, but with a bit more of a plush interior. But in such a tightly competitive segment, there's really no class best. I think there's a car for everyone in this segment, and the Kamiq will definitely have its place there. It drives very well, it's very relaxing, and it's all in all a very good car. If you don't want a Skoda, if you've got a bit of badge snobbery about you, then by all means go for something like the Volkswagen T-Cross. It's a bit more funky in terms of the styling and what you can do with the interior and personalising the car, but you then have to deal with that interior, which is all hard plastics, which is very un-Volkswagen-like. And then you've got cars like the Kia Stonic, which come with a 7-year warranty, which is class leading. It's really just a case of what is the car for you. I mean, I personally really love the Kamiq. I think it's very well specced out, and price-wise, it's very competitive. In terms of rivals, well, of course, there are loads of them out there. There's no real bad cars. And also, because of this segment, we've got new rivals coming, like the all-new Renault Captur. We've got the new Peugeot 2008, which looks absolutely stunning. And we've also got the all-new Nissan Juke, which is going to be a huge improvement on the Mark 1, which I just thought was a hideous pig monster. So yeah, this is a really closely contended segment of cars, and I can't say that the Kamiq is best or the Arona is best. It's basically what comes down to you. Now, if it was me with my own money, and as I've mentioned before in other videos, I am a bit of a Skoda fan, I would go for the Kamiq. Everything does feel very familiar, but I would go for an SE spec with a few added options on the car, but that's just me. But let me know what you think. Click down in the comments section below and let me know what car you would go for in this class. But yeah, I really do like the Kamiq. It is very quirky, it's very Skoda and Volkswagen Group in the way it drives and how it feels, excuse me. But in terms of the class best, I don't think there's a class best. I think there is a car for you, and that's the best way to word it. But I do like the Kamiq. Some people won't like its styling. I really do. I love the rear end of the car. It does look very squat and purposeful, and if Skoda do decide to make a VRS version of this, I don't think they will, but if they did, with say a 2-litre turbocharged petrol that you got in the Polo GTI, that would be a very fun proposition. But yeah, I really do like the Kamiq, and I do recommend you have a test drive in one, definitely. So everyone, I hope you've enjoyed my review of the all-new Skoda Kamiq. As always, please hit that like button, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell notifications icon to let you know when I, Dave the Auto Bear, bring out a new video. If you've got any questions on the Kamiq and my time with it, please put them down in the comments section below. And of course, please follow on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter for additional content, including still images and live videos of cars and events that I go to. Again, I've really enjoyed the Skoda Kamiq, and in what is probably the most hotly contended segment in the motor market, there's really no winners here. I think every single one of these cars is a winner in their own right, and that's why you need to test drive all of them. Take a Saturday, Sunday, take a whole weekend, drive all these cars in its class and find the right one for you. Because you never know, it could be the first car you drive, it could be the last one, but you'll definitely get the car that you want. But guys, have yourselves a wonderful weekend, or whatever it is you're doing, or whatever day it is you're watching this video, and I will catch you all in the next one. Take care and bye-bye.